Alright guys, welcome back to F1 News. Quick video breaking down all the goings on of the Miami Grand Prix and plenty of the reaction as well. If this turn of events does not set up a good Grand Prix tomorrow, I do not know what will. Rain potentially in the air, Verstappen starting P9, the grid is an absolute mess tomorrow. 6 different manufacturers in the top 6 grid positions. So much to talk about, very much enjoyed your thoughts in the comments below. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new as always. Let's dive straight in then. So Q1, Hamilton had a weird instance here where everyone was on their out lap. Magnussen, I think, in front was preparing for his lap. There's still stewards' inquiries on this going on. I don't really think there'll be any repercussions, but Magnussen could get dropped down from this position. But Hamilton took evasive action, even though really Hamilton probably should have just been slowing up or took evasive action to the left. Did his front wing a bit of damage, so had to pit and eventually did a good enough lap to get through Q1. But look how competitive Q1 was. After practice, it didn't look like it was going to be super competitive. Verstappen at 1:27.3. The entire rest of the grid, it's separated by less than a second. So Sargent was P20, the poor local lad, 1.2 seconds off Verstappen. A 1.2 second spread over the entire grid is very impressive, actually, it's got to be said. And it was absolute chaos in the midfield there. Like, no one really knew who was going to get through apart from the Red Bulls. Even Hamilton, he puts in a good lap at the end when necessary, because I think Hamilton was P20, Russell was P18 going into their final runs. They needed to improve. They got through P6 and P11, but still, they're only separated by 2/10, and that's a massive spread from grid positioning, right? So a crazy Q1, and often what happens is there's a crazy Q1, Q2, and then Q3 it goes back to Noah's Ark, 2x2. But thankfully it wasn't the case this time round. Norris, Tsunoda, Stroll, Piastri, Sargent out. Stroll, that's the thing, right? In an Aston Martin, did not put a good lap together in time. Wasn't actually that far off Alonso here, but it was just so competitive that he was out. Same with Tsunoda on a De Vries, which is a bit of a surprise to me. Both McLarens out, unfortunately for them, despite all the positive noise about their upgrade. So both McLarens out of there straight away. But then Q2 swiftly followed by some other Mercedes powered cars, namely Albon P11, Hamilton P13. This was a big talking point as well, and was the biggest talking point up until Q3 of what's happening to the Mercedes. They weren't good around here last year, to be honest. This year, if anything, they look even worse, right? They look pretty tragic in practice, apart from the very first FP1 where it was, you know, strange conditions. They went out towards the end, did some good laps. But yeah, Hamilton and Russell were both not really on the pace. It seemed like one of them probably wasn't going to make it through into Q3. Last time out in Baku, it was Russell. This time it was Hamilton. They sent him out very late here, Mercedes, and that's something they could get away with a couple of years ago, no problem at all, when their car was super good. But as it is now, they need that car absolutely on point, especially with how competitive it was, to put in a good lap. Hamilton was about 1.5 tenths up on Russell in the final sector, but he lost about 3 or 4 tenths in the first couple of sectors. He reckons because his tyres weren't up to temperature, and we'll get into his explanation for that in a second. But that's the thing, even a couple of tenths, that's going to do you out of qualifying with the way that Mercedes is presently looking. And Hamilton P13, especially with all the talk, we talked about it earlier today, of it not being easy to overtake around here tomorrow, with the Mercedes straight line speed being far from spectacular. That's not a good position for Hamilton to find himself in terms of searching for points tomorrow. So then we get into Q3, and Max Verstappen was pretty much the first one out. Thought he was going to, it looked like he was nailed on for pole position, right? But going into the end of Sector 1, has a couple of moments here. These are really tricky corners, and it's a phenomenal section to watch the Formula 1 cars go, and it's got to be said. That end of Sector 1 Miami is just absolutely beautiful. The cars are absolutely on the limit. Verstappen makes a couple of mistakes, but doesn't crucially bin it in the wall. You can already see here, actually, Leclerc's tyre tracks from the same situation yesterday, and this is the difference, I think. We'll get into Leclerc right now, because Leclerc then did his fast lap after Verstappen didn't get a lap done, went back into the pits. Perez stuck at P1, Alonso P2, but everyone thought, okay, because the first laps came in, Magnussen stuck at P4, and we're like, hang on a second, but Magnussen was like a second down on Perez, so didn't seem like that was going to be maintained. But of course, one incident changes the whole story, and if there's one man you can rely on having an incident in situations like this, it's unfortunately probably Charles Leclerc. He goes off in a similar way to what he did previously, spins off, and this time he doesn't actually go in front forwards facing, I suppose. He actually spins the car around and puts the rear of the car in. So, you know, I don't know what that's going to mean for the gearbox, for the rear diffuser, for the rear elements of the floor. A lot of new parts they put in there, Ferrari. So, yeah, not a good look at all. And this is Leclerc walking away, as we can see. Perez, Alonso, Sainz, good recovery weekend from him. Magnussen, Gasly. So great from the Alpines to put them both into Q3. And it's Gasly, Russell, Leclerc, Ocon, with neither Bottas, who did a great job to get this far, or Verstappen putting a lap in. So, yeah, that rear part of Leclerc's car does not not look particularly good right now. Ferrari have got a big job on overnight, and they put some new parts in that car recently. A new MGUK, I believe they put in it. There's obviously the gearbox will be relatively fresh as well, and that could potentially be damaged. So yeah, big concerns. What do you guys think about Leclerc, right? Because he is a driver that is absolutely on the limits. Going into his final lap of Q3, no matter the circumstances, it's either going to be an absolute monster lap at a pole position probably, or it's going to be in the wall. And that's how Leclerc drives. Jensen Button described him as being at 101%. He was just over the line. And, Brundle was wondering, does he really know what his limit is? Was it necessary to go that hard in that situation? And look, you've got to be right on the limit if you want to beat the Red Bull. I understand that. But these situations for Leclerc do happen relatively often. And it does feel like, at least compared to Verstappen, when Verstappen makes mistakes, it doesn't cost him this badly, okay? In this circumstance, it kind of did, because he's down in P9, but we've seen in races previously, Verstappen makes errors, maybe locks up, goes off track, or even in qualifying, it doesn't often result in an actual crash for Verstappen, but when Leclerc pushes it to the absolute limit, often if he's off, he's in the wall, and, I respect it from Leclerc, I don't really do, but it does feel like, in terms of being a true championship winning level driver in terms of the consistency required to achieve that over the course of a season. Obviously, he's not going to do it this year anyway because the Ferrari isn't a Red Bull, but still, Leclerc, I think, has got something to find individually to become the driver that I think he needs to be if he wants to be beating Verstappen in, let's just say, similar machinery in coming years. Doesn't mean he's not absolutely phenomenal to watch though, because you never know what's going to happen in Q3, and he was on the absolute limit here, and it does feel like, again, that this tweet was even made after yesterday, but yeah, Leclerc, when he sees blue tarmac, is just in the wall, unfortunately for him. So Verstappen, though, because he didn't get that lap in, he's starting P9. And you might think, oh, P9, no problem at all, he's going to come through and get an easy top 2, which might well still be the case, and I would say more than likely that still will be the case. But the DRS zones have been shortened. The Red Bull will have a lot of pace, especially in race trim, we know that for sure, but it's not going to be super easy. And by the time Verstappen does get to P2, as he probably will, how far ahead will Perez be? We know that safety cars can happen here, though red flags can happen here, so it's not a foregone conclusion, but this is Perez's chance. If he wins this race, he, I believe, will be leading the championship, which will be the first time that Verstappen hasn't led the championship in a very long time. So, I mean, look at this starting grid. It's an absolute mess. We've got 6 different manufacturers in the top 6. Red Bull, Aston Martin, Ferrari, Haas, Alpine, Mercedes. I mean, what is going on there? It's actually awesome to see, and it's a real toss-up, right? Who knows, apart from the Red Bull, who's the fastest in race pace? Alonso looked good in the Aston. Stroll's down in 18th, though. So who's good, right? We don't know. It's really exciting to see. And whether there are differences enough for anyone to make overtakes, that's another question. Hamilton's got a task in his hand to make his way through as well. He's starting down in P13, of course. But yeah, Verstappen P9, how far can he go? Big questions. But Alonso, great performance from him. I believe his best qualifying in a long time, since probably 2007 in the US of A. I believe it was Hamilton's worst ever qualifying on US soil. But Perez, man, another pole position. His first one not at Jeddah. And I still think that Verstappen has some clear pace in hand over Checo, but I mean, still, it does make the championship even more interesting by every single time this happens. Quick comment on Lewis Hamilton, because he was clearly frustrated with the decisions of his team here. He was immediately on the radio saying, we left that way too late, guys. You guys put me out in a bad spot. And there's people that will say, maybe understandably, he's always blaming other people, right? Maybe he should focus on his own driving. But, fundamentally, when the car is so on the brink there of either being in Q2 or not, these decisions from the team do carry important weight. And Hamilton goes on to say after the fact that it was a difficult session, had issues with the rhythm, getting into the rhythm of the car. They were always going to be on the verge of getting into position, but the issue is they went out right at the end, so tried to get the temperatures into the tyres, but then it was the massive traffic jam just before the final corner, and then everyone slows down, so couldn't get temperatures into the tyres. And you see that based on the Delta, right, where he was up in Q3 on Russell, but lost a couple of tenths in each of Sector 1, Sector 2, especially Sector 1. You're going to suffer hard if your tyres aren't up to temperature, and that really was the couple of tenths that cost him the chance of getting into Q3. So definitely frustrations with the decision by his team. I always find it interesting looking at when Hamilton uses the term we and when he uses the term they, because as he goes on to say here, it's one of those days, not the best. Couple of moments where the car was feeling half decent. I thought I'd be able to get it into Q3, but at the end, they put me out behind 7 cars or something like that. When I got to the last corner, I was the last of the group, had to back up, lost stall tire temperature. When I started the lap, I had no grip. So, you know, sometimes he says we, referring to the team. Sometimes he says they when he's not happy with them. I think that's kind of the conclusion that we can draw from this. And, yeah, he goes on to say that, like, look, when you've got a great car, you can sit back, be relaxed, take your time, doesn't matter. You're going to be able to get through anyway. But, yeah, he wants to get through as far as he can from 13th and is going to be focused on doing so, but it's going to be a challenge. And there is other things to focus on in the Grand Prix as well. As I say, it might rain tomorrow. It's not a guarantee, but there is a chance of rains for tomorrow's Grand Prix, and that would be very interesting what would happen if that was the case. Verstappen came afterwards and said, look, I made a mistake. It was my fault, messed up in that first lap. So, you know, it's unlucky in a way that Leclerc crashed and Checo got pole and Verstappen was P9, but that's how it goes. If he gets a better banker lap in, then he doesn't have this predicament. And he said to the media, minimum P2. Like, he believes 100% confidence. There is practically zero chance in his opinion that he's not getting at least P2. So, you know, that's Verstappen's opinion. I more than likely agree with him, but who knows? The race tomorrow could be pretty chaotic. And another thing, because I've been mentioning the last few days here, like Russell versus Verstappen, pretty spicy storyline, and guess what? Tomorrow, there more than likely will be a moment where Verstappen has to pass George Russell on track. So how's that going to go? Well, I'm looking forward to it. But very much enjoyed to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Hit the like button if you enjoyed. Subscribe if you're new. Take care, and I'll see you next time.